Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Private Officer Beat Radio. I'm your host, Rick McCann, broadcasting live today from Studio A of our Charlotte, North Carolina corporate office. A lot happening, so sit back, strap in, and enjoy today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the LP Zone, where everything is about the loss prevention industry. We're talking LP, asset protection, retail security, mall security, uniform, plain clothes, ORC, and fraud investigations. I'm your host, Rick McCann, founder and CEO of Private Officer International and Armor College. Today, we're going to get right into the meat of the subject. We're going to talk about fraud, and there are many different ways that you can fraudulently steal from a retailer. Today, we're only going to cover two of those areas, two of the more prevalent areas, and that is fraud by bad checks and also fraud through credit cards. So let's talk about the check situation and how that has really changed over the years. I know when I was in loss prevention, we had many different methods where people would come in and steal merchandise through the use of bad checks. Of course, you have the obvious person who has a checking account. They just don't have any money in it, and they would come in and they would oftentimes buy up a lot of merchandise knowing that the check was going to bounce, but they would buy up a bunch of merchandise and then the check would come back, and we, of course, would, in our LP office, begin that collection process and take it all the way through the steps of securing arrest warrants if necessary for passing the bad checks. The other method that was prevalent at that time was, closed accounts. And this was an obvious attempt at theft. They knew there was no money, and in fact, the account wasn't even live. It was closed, and many times a person would come into the store knowingly, fraudulently, writing those checks for large purchases, especially during the Christmas holidays, Easter, back-to-school sales, and things of that nature. Now, in this situation, many times people using closed account checks would bring that merchandise back for an instant refund. Checks, just not too long ago, used to take 3 to even 7 days to clear. Now, because of the new check verification and processing procedures through the banks, checks normally clear within 24 to 48 hours at the maximum. And so retailers often see that the checks are no good much quicker. But not too long ago, the customer would come in and write these checks. They would then bring the merchandise back for a quick, hot refund, cash in their pocket. Those who were more professional would do this type of system throughout the region, and they would hit many stores, whether it be Walmart, Target, Stop and Shop, Macy's, whatever, and they would go for the high-end, usually electronics, TVs, stereos, phones, things of that nature. And then they would return it for a quick refund. Checks are still a problem, although I don't think not as bad as they were maybe 20 years ago or so, but there are a number of ways that checks can be fraudulently passed in the store. One of the ways is that many people will wash the check. And basically that is you get a check sometimes stolen out of the mailbox, and you basically wash that check and put in your name or a fake name in place of the actual owner's name, and you go in and cash it. The other way that checks are fraudulently cashed these days, many stores, grocery stores especially, still cash payroll checks. And so what happens is that you can buy stock paper, and oftentimes people will steal physical checks from companies, from businesses, out of their mailbox or from employees or online methods, and they will use the check number, the account number, the routing number and the account number, and they will make those payroll checks out to various names of people who don't exist, but they have obtained or dummied up fake false identifications for. Then they'll go into the store, and with a legitimate company check, they will cash those checks for substantial amounts of money. On the professional end, this is not something done just once or twice. They do it again throughout the region, and sometimes even throughout many, many states. There are operations that have run the gamut up and down the East Coast, even going all the way to Hawaii in several cases that I'm aware of, and they would just keep cashing these checks all over the place and really kind of coop up a lot of money, and stores had no way of recouping that because the identification was false, the information was false, the company that had the check written on their account was legit, but the people cashing the check was not. It's bought online. It can be bought at most office supply stores, and even at Walmart. You can order checks. They don't verify account numbers. They don't verify account owners. You can order checks, even business checks, online at Walmart. They'll print them and send them to you wherever you are without verification. This definitely makes it difficult to track down who's cashing the checks, unless someone becomes suspicious at the store level and they call police and officers arrive while this crime is in progress. There is a large chance that these suspects will get away with it until eventually something triggers the store employees ahead of time and police are able to get there and take them into custody. Cashing fraudulent checks is a felony, and if you are doing it across state lines, it could become a federal offense. The FBI could get involved. Fraud in and of itself is usually also a felony. Using fake identifications, stolen check numbers, also felonies. The people involved would face dozens and dozens of felony charges, possibly even on the federal level. Every check cashed fraudulently is a separate charge. While working in retail, I've also come across a number of employees who are involved in helping people from outside of the store cash fraudulent checks. They would work behind the service desk, they would work as a front-end manager, and their friends would come in with fake checks or bad checks, and they would knowingly approve those. Even for high dollar amounts, their friends would get away scot-free until they didn't. Checks is still an issue for retailers, especially those cashing payroll checks. It is very easy to go in and buy merchandise, and as long as you have the identification, most of the time, the front-end managers, the assistant managers, and even the GMs are going to approve the check, especially during the holidays, back to school, special sales, and things of that nature. And, you know, most stores, they don't want to give up sales. They want to get sales. So they're going to try their best to approve those checks, even if they do look a little suspicious. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got a lot more to talk about. We're talking today about fraudulent checks, how to recover them, as well as credit cards that are real. They have real account numbers on them. You're listening to the LP Zone. We'll be right back.
Nurse, I need you to apply pressure to the head wound until I can get to it. I'm concerned she's lost too much blood.
Oh, no.
You in the corner, who are you? You're not supposed to be here.
She's my girlfriend, Doctor.
You need to wait out in the waiting room.
Please, Doctor, I want to stay with her.
Look, she's been badly injured. So if you want to do what's best for her, you need to let us do our work.
Please, Doctor, she has to be okay. I didn't mean to do this. I love her.
Wait a second. You were the driver?
Yes, but I didn't mean to. I swear, we went to dinner. I was just buzzed. I only had a few drinks.
Just buzzed? Why didn't you tell us that? In that case, your girlfriend is fine.
Hey, sweetie. I feel great. You want to get out of here?
I can't believe this. Really, Doctor? She's really okay?
What, are you kidding? No, not really. Nurse, get me a suture kit. Stat.
Buzzed driving. Maybe we should stop acting like it's no big deal. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Ad Council, and this state.
The Federal Aviation Administration wants you to fly your drone responsibly. Avoid flying your drone near other aircraft, especially near airports. Fly your drone below 400 feet. Always keep your drone in sight. If you see a safety issue involving drones, contact local law enforcement immediately. Fly smart. Fly safe. Have fun.
All right, welcome back from the break. You're on the LP Zone. Loss prevention, everything here is about asset protection. LP, uniform physical security, ORC, fraud, and so much more here on the LP Zone. We were talking at the break, just before we went on the break, that we have a problem still in our retail stores, especially the non-big box, the specialty stores, the mom and pops, and others where checks are still an issue. It's very easy to slide a fraudulent check across the counter and present it without too much of a hassle, without too many questions. And it certainly is still an issue, not maybe as big as it was 30 years ago or before the banking system went to a fast turnaround on getting that cleared. But having checks stolen out of mailboxes, having professionals buy check paper and then print it up with both dummy accounts as well as stolen accounts is still a big deal. You know, it doesn't take much for anyone to go online and put in Wells Fargo and get their routing number and then just come up with some type of checking account number. Stores don't generally slide that through to get verification on the checking account number, but definitely on the routing number. So a lot of times, as long as that routing number is correct and the person has matching identification, it's going to be cleared by the front-end supervisor, the assistant, or the GM. Checks are a problem, and we need to probably have stricter procedures and policies as to the authorization process. However, as you know, retailers are not there to spend 100% of their day on providing security. They are there to provide customer service, supervision, and to keep the ball rolling on the front end. And that means getting customers in and out, just like a restaurant, turning over that table. Here at the front end, we're turning over that cash register, trying to get those aisles clear. One of the other methods of fraud that's really still big in the retail business industry, of course, is credit cards. Again, it's very, very simple these days, believe it or not, to duplicate, to ghost a credit card. If you can obtain the credit card number, which now you can do this very easily, especially on the internet. You can go on the black web and buy hundreds of people's accounts for pennies, nickels, dollars. You can also steal credit cards out of mailboxes. This is a big deal in my neighborhood and in others. We monitor retail news. We monitor law enforcement, police news. We see the fraud. We see the credit card thefts still extremely high. So if you steal a credit card out of the mailbox, you probably have a day or two, maybe 3, to go to the store and dummy up some identification that goes along with those credit cards and just go ahead and cash them for the maximum credit line. So if you know that the credit line says you've been approved for $3,000, you go ahead and get that credit card, call in and get that going, and then just go and keep on charging until you reach the maximum credit line. The other method that's very big in fraudulent credit cards across the nation is that you can buy plastic credit card templates, and you can print up credit card numbers as long as they're legit and put a different person's name on it. So the other thing that has happened to me several times with credit cards and debit cards is that when you're paying at the register or the gas pump or even paying the tab at a restaurant, it's very easy for machines or individuals to swipe your card. Card readers are very small, pocketable. Put it in your hand and swipe the card, strip on the back of the card, and that gathers all of the personal data, the card number, the name, expiration, even that security code. It's very easy these days to gather that intel almost effortlessly and not even be there. You know, you all heard about the gas stations and other places that have the card readers hidden. That's why it's extremely important these days to be sure that you check. Make sure nothing is loose before you do put your debit card or your credit card into either a register or at the gas pump or some other location. I travel extensively, and that's one of the things that I've had an issue with 3 times in about 5 or 6 years, where someone has been able to capture my card number. Now, in one case, I know 1,000,000% that it was a woman working at a restaurant, and not a cheap restaurant, not McDonald's. And we were sitting all as a group at the table. She took my credit card along with the bill, and that very day, within about 3 hours, this occurred in Nashville, Tennessee, that very day, within about 3 hours, there were purchases made just outside of Detroit, Michigan, is where the merchandise was going to. And so I know that it was this person. I'm just as sure as I know my name. Unfortunately, I just couldn't legally prove it. We couldn't obtain warrants. There was nothing on the restaurant video that would indicate that she swiped it, but I'm 100% sure that that happened. Credit card fraud and retail fraud in checks, false identification is extremely hard to catch and extremely hard to get the culprit. And yet it amounts to hundreds of millions of dollars of lost revenue to retailers, including restaurants and hotels, gas stations, big box stores, and everyone in between. We still have to call this shrink. It still is. It's a loss. It's a theft. It is easier in a big box store or a specialty store that has an LP team, because when you are monitoring the front end especially, or any of the side areas, the specialty areas where they have registers, you know, you have an opportunity, if you see something suspicious, to see what they are doing, to see if, you know, those credit card numbers are stolen. A lot of times, there are software programs now that you can get to punch those numbers in, and if it's been reported within the last 72 hours or further, it's going to show up. So there are possible times. Here at Private Officer International, we have a news department, and we read a lot of cases, not thousands, but we do read hundreds a year, where LP agents have become suspicious, especially when an individual has gone to electronics and the high-end categories within the store and purchased high-end merchandise with credit cards. They became suspicious, and they were able to stop the fraud from happening right there live in front of them, and even in a number of cases, along with local law enforcement, bust large gangs of people that were doing this as their full-time job, which we call ORC, Organized Retail Crime. ORC does not have to be just about shoplifting. It doesn't have to be about employee theft. It could actually be employee theft. It can be checks and credit cards and a whole lot more. As asset protection agents, loss prevention, we need to be able to train more in identification of the various methods of fraudulently obtaining merchandise beyond the shoplifting and the internal theft. There's a lot of ways that employees steal and commit these crimes, especially now with the self-serve registers. And there's a lot of tools out there, a lot of training. We can become much more proficient at recognizing people who are in the store. Maybe we don't know immediately that they are there to pass bad checks or use stolen credit cards, but we can, by their movement, by our observations, by their MO, and we can pretty much tell sometimes that they are up to no good, and we can begin an investigation and conduct further surveillance and even get law enforcement involved if we think that a crime is afoot. In fact, that is often the best way to nab the people in the process of committing these frauds, because they may get there, run a plate, a tag number, recognize the vehicle, recognize the people. Maybe they're wanted for doing the same thing across town or the next town over or the next state over. So getting loss prevention and law enforcement working together really is a key element of making big apprehensions and getting some of these things stopped before they leave the store. Recognizing suspicious activity, crimes afoot, it's fairly easy if you get to know people's MO, method of operation, and understand what is normal behavior and what looks suspicious. That's going to conclude today's episode of the LP Zone. Remember, there's a lot of training available at armorcollege.org in the retail area, including LP and organized retail, crime, fraud, and other courses and programs that can be taken there. Until the next time, be safe, be blessed, and we'll see you back here on the radio.